Hello, everybody. Welcome back to my podcast. And I'm just going to get right into the podcast today. As you can tell from the title, I am going to be talking about the Bible Belt Strangler. And the Bible Belt Strangler is a nickname given to an unknown killer suspect of being responsible for the Redhead murders, a series of unsolved murders that took place in Texas, Tennessee, Kentucky, and other neighboring states between 1983 and 1985. The murders involved the bodies of up to 14 young white redhead or reddish hair being dumped in numerous kinds of locations. And in 2018, students at Elizabeth High School in Tennessee began researching the redhead murders as a part of a psychology class, and they used multiple different kind of resources, including police research, TBI interview notes, and interviews with the retired FBI behavioral analysts and other kind of experts. The students determined that 6 of the murders fit the profile of the same killer, whom they called the Bible Belt Strangler, identified as a potential suspect, Jerry Johns, a deceased trucker who had died in prison in 2015 for strangling a prostitute in 1985. In 2019, the Tennessee Bureau of Investigations released a statement linking to Johns to the murder of Tina Farmer, one of the women identified by the students as a potential victim of the Bible Belt Strangler. The students and their teacher presented their evidence to a grand jury in Tennessee, who ruled that if John were still alive, the criminal justice system would have brought the full force of its power down on him. I'm solo gonna be reading a website that was published on January 2024, and it's called Solo Survivor of Serial Killer Speaks Out After High School Students with Podcast Helped Crack 40-year-old Case. A survivor of killer Jerry Johns has spoken out for the first time. The solo survivor of the Bible Belt Strangler has spoken out for the first time and detailed her experience following the conclusion of the cold case. In surprising turn of events, high school students were able to shed light on a 40-year-old cold case thanks to the help of their Tennessee psychology and history teacher, Alex Campbell. In 2018, Campbell decided to have his students to solve a series of cold case killings and recently spoke out about their success. More than 20 students worked on finding a potential connection between a long line of red-headed white women who were murdered in the surrounding area in crimes that became known as redhead murders. The killings involved up to 14 possible victims whose bodies were found abandoned along major highways. Some of the women were also believed to be prostitutes. The group were able to agree that 6 of the victims were potentially connected to the same killer known as the Bible Belt Strangler. The class also identified the potential suspect trucker, Jerry Johns. Johns died in prison in 2015 after being found guilty of strangling a prostitute in Knox County, Kentucky back in 1985. These students were now revealing their astonishing finding in a 10-episode podcast, Murder 101. A victim of John's, only referred to as L, spoke to Champbell while on the podcast. "There's no reason for me to be alive except the good Lord let me live," she said on the podcast, according to a report by the New York Post. "I didn't even know Jerry Johns had died, but an FBI agent called me and told me that they used DNA to prove that he killed this other girl. They questioned me, then it happened, and one of the girls looked very familiar to me." Tina McKinney Farmer was linked to Johns in 2018 through DNA evidence. "There was a whole bunch of them that questioned about me," she said. "We sat at this big, huge, long table, and there were photographs of all of these women, and some of them looked like photographs of me. There were dozens of girls that looked a lot like me, and they called them the redneck murders." Campbell praised Elle for her bravery in speaking out and began to well up with tears. "This is a terrible, tragic story for a lot of people and a lot of families, but if there was a hero, it's you," he said through tears. "Your will to live is what got him arrested. Keep him off the streets." I just want to make sure that's overall. Yes, that is overall what it is. Now I'm going to read the other one, which is the last one. So, this one is called "A Trail of Bodies Was Found Along Interstates in the Bible Belt, but how many killers were at work?" And this one was by Jean Campbell and posted on January 20th, 2024. Her street name was Baby Doll, and she was hustled for living in Arkansas. Some called her by her given name, Lisa, and she was well known by by giving her name Lisa, as she was well known by cops. Lisa Ann Nicholas hailed from West Virginia. She was 20 years old when she died. The victim was of homicide strangleism. I think this is something different. Hold on before I continuing this. Sorry, you guys, because I am a little lost right now. Okay, now I'm caught up. Sorry, you guys. So, okay, this is a little bit about the victims. Okay, now I am a little caught up. Sorry, you guys. Nicholas was found near the exit ramp off of I-40 in Tennessee. Her body was brutalized and began to decompose. She'd been making her way out of town, hitchhiking from her home based on eastern Arkansas. Her body was covered only by the remains of a knit top. However, killer Nicholas dumped her on the side of the highway in the early fall of 1983. She wasn't the first redhead, but she was one of the few who would get her name back. Despite all the traffic, her body laid alongside the highway for 4 days before a hitchhiker noticed Nicholas' corpse and contacted local authorities. Their first object was to find who she was. Tennessee State Police were unable to identify her on the scene, but after 9 months traced her as a local transit sex worker with a long history of arrests using fingerprints. Nicholas was one of the last 6 women murdered by the serial killer later named the Bible Belt Strangler. Almost certainly the truck driver who murdered mostly redheaded women between 1978 and 1972. Although one man was convicted, definitely tied into a victim by DNA and 2 other victims by method. It was certain there was more than one. Authorities believe the killers, who spanned authority from Pennsylvania to Mississippi, could be responsible up to 14 murders, but confident 6 homicides are linked. Baby doll's body was transferred back to the morgue once they knew her identity. When the police notified her two brothers, neither men showed up to claim her body. A mystery by any other name. At the time, Tennessee police identified Nicholas, a member of a Petro Police Vince squad in Nashville. The Tennessee Her rape sheet scratches from the ceiling to the floor 3 times. Multiple agencies in Tennessee, Arkansas, Kentucky, Mississippi, West Virginia, and Pennsylvania have handled the cases potentially linked as redhead murders, with similar victims but with limited collaboration, especially in the 1980s. The Vince Squad wasn't the only law enforcement agency who saw the victims as less deserving of justice. The victims of the Bible Belt Strangler were young women, often homeless, making a living as sex workers, usually at truck stops, not always. In 1983, when their bodies began surfacing, sex workers' homicides relieved a little attention, and there was no definite connection between bodies found in multiple states. In April 1985, with multiple similar victims authorized from the Tennessee Bureau of Investigation, along with FBI agents and law enforcement from 5 states, met to discuss 8 potentially related homicides, according to Knox News. In September 1983, Nicholas' body was recovered for 4 days after she'd been murdered. She believed to have seen the second victim. Her pimp was located 9 months later and he told authorities he saw her climbed into a semi-truck outside from Schererville, Arkansas truck stop. The auto claimed she was murdered within 24 hours of leaving the truck stop. Nicholas, who also went by the last name of Jarvis, got her name back, but at least 3 of the victims were still classified as Jane Does and have never been identified. Not all were rednecks, but other forensic clues left behind linked the women as possible victims of the same killer. The TBI task force suspected a killer, probably one who drove a truck, but they had no way to identify his vehicle and many of the victims. It wasn't until 2018 that multiple of the women would be identified through fingerprints, family, and DNA. Lost and found. On January 1st, 1984, the unknown pregnant woman with red hair was found dead alongside I-75 in Tennessee. Her body had been tossed down an embankment. She was fully clothed in a tan pullover and blue jeans. She remained unidentified until 2018. She was determined to be Tina Farmer from Indiana. Along with her identity, the cause of her death was finally assigned: strangulation. Her identity and manner of death, along with her DNA from semen, would finally confirm the prime suspect. Farmer had red hair, green eyes with light freckles complexion. She had been wrapped inside a blanket after she was strangled to death. Her body also relieved she'd once given birth, although although her family reported her missing. Farmers' ritual information hadn't entered into the national database. She was 21 years old when she died, and autos showed she was 5 months pregnant, according to Knox News. Another victim was assigned the name Conductee Jane Doe. Her body had been stuffed inside a rusty refrigerator in Kentucky, there you go, off I-25. She would identify 30 years later through DNA by her grown children as a young woman named S.B. Pilgrim. The last known victim, who was later identified, was discovered on April 14th, 1985 in Greene County, Tennessee. Although authorized lifted good quality fingerprints, they couldn't track down her identity from any police bloppers or state police database. She was not a redhead and was stabbed and beaten to death rather than strangled. However, investigators tied her to another homicide based on timing and location. In 2018, law enforcement confirmed her name was Elizabeth Lamott, 17, of New Hampshire. She walked away from a group home and a week before she was murdered. That is it for this podcast. And if you guys enjoyed this podcast in any shape or form, please let me know in the comments below. And if you guys want me to talk about any certain kind of cases or any of that, let me know. And I will see you guys next week. Bye.